So then, fancy a case about a cross-dressing serial killer? Here you go. This is a story of Hadden Clark. Welcome to Enter the Dark. Hello and welcome to Enter the Dark. I am Jan. With me as always is Les. You okay?
All right.
You can reach for your beer, it's fine. You reach for that beer.
It's not a problem.
So yes, welcome. Today's case is Hadden Clark. Leslie's never heard of it, surprisingly. And he's one of the serial killers that didn't come from the bottom of society.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his parents were quite rich, but we'll get into that. But yeah, speaking of quite rich, we're not. So if you want to help us, you can go to Patreon and subscribe to us at patreon.com/enterthedark. Anything from $1 to $50. $10 or more gets you your own case cover. It's awesome. Speaking of that, if you got $7.50 or more, I do this. Yes, I read your name out. We have Hannah Blue Hannington, Amanda Champagne, Astoria Crowley, Amy Emin and Jack Coleman, Sasha Johnson, Lisa Dempsey, Marie T. Jensen, Casey the Cannibal, Misty Day, Becky Louise, Izzy from the Clink, Jules Henderson, James Hennington, Mr. Crow, Richard Beccarelli, Michelle Hudson, Alicia Llewellyn, and Cookie Fenning. Fenning, I can't remember. It's Cookie.
They're going up, they are.
You are Cookie.
No, just the Patreon peeps.
Yeah, because people like us. I just don't tell you about the ones who deleted us. There's a recession. The economy's in the toilet. So that's why we appreciate everyone that does it. But yes, if you do want to, you can go to that. But let's get started. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this now, like, share, subscribe, and leave a generic comment for me. Thank you. So then, Leslie.
Right.
As you know, most serial killers come from the bottom half of society, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they grow up in poverty and have few opportunities. Parents or caregivers often abuse them. Now, Hadden Clark, he was abused, but he was given many advantages, the result of being the progeny of a distinguished family.
Ooh, so, distinguished.
Distinguished. His mother Flavia boasted of being able to trace her lineage back to the voyage of the Mayflower and had direct descendants who were heroes in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
It's all right, isn't it? Hadden's grandfather on his father's side served as the elected Republican mayor of the White Plains, New York. His father, also named Hadden, would help invent clear plastic wrap, so cling film, and also fire retardant carpeting.
Republicans, though.
But I think that was back in the day when Republicans weren't that bad, because you had, like, Abe Lincoln and stuff, didn't you? And he got...
Oh, yeah, he was all right, wasn't he, Abe? Good old Abe, with his top hat.
Honest Abe. Was George Washington a Republican?
I don't know. Well, It's an interesting question.
I don't know.
Because they founded it as a republic, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because they wanted to make him king, and he was like, no. That may be a gross simplification of American history.
I'd say to...
You tell me, you guys tell us, like...
I mean, I'd say that, but I know what the American education system is like. So you Canadians tell us, please.
Yeah, I like American history, but it's just not as interesting as European people fucking battering each other in suits of armour.
It's not, is it?
It's not. Let's be honest, it's not.
Nah. Anyway... The Clark family, they were well off and well thought of by their neighbours. Despite all this, the family had a deep secret.
Deep?
Yeah, well, not really. They were both parents were alcoholics, whose drinking often led to physical battles where sometimes fought out in front of their children.
I don't know what that's like.
No, it's because you don't see your kids. Hadden was born in April of 1951, and he was the second child. His oldest brother, Bradfield...
Bradfield?
Come on. That's just a place, isn't it, Bradfield? That's just like a fucking town, it's not a name. Had been born a year earlier. Jeffrey Clark, the youngest. Hadden and Jeffrey. Yeah, and then fucking Bradfield. Did you go through the name? Like Bradfield, Hadden. Can we call this one a normal name? Yeah, let's call him Jeffrey. Fucking come on. He was the youngest brother and he arrived in 1955. The last child, Alison, was born in 1959. And she would run away from home as a teen and later break ties with her parents, telling an investigator, I never had a family.
Just came fully formed. They cloned me.
Yeah, I was made in a lab. I was part of Project Girly by fucking Diazian Hossenkoft. I mean, imagine that. If he was, then he'd be like, what? He had level 22 clearance in the NSA. The Clark family bounced around Connecticut and New Jersey as Hadden was growing up, rarely staying at any place for more than a year. Hadden's father, who had both an MBA and a PhD in chemistry, never seemed satisfied with his employers, always searching for more money. Bradfield was a handful from the start and involved with drugs as a teen. Though he would receive 2 university degrees and highly thought of in the new world of computers, the Clark genes would be his downfall. In 1984, during a night of drinking and drugs, he would murder his date, a beautiful 29-year-old woman named Patricia Mack. After banging her head against a brick cinder block and strangling her, he would cut her body up into 11 pieces in his bathtub, cook part of her breast on his barbecue grill, eat them, and then stuff the remaining body parts into plastic bags.
Wait, this is how this starts?
This is his brother.
So this is the brother of the guy we're covering?
Yeah, this is Bradfield.
Oh, shit. Wow. Now you've got my attention.
Yeah. So, like Hadden would, he intended to bury the body, but grew remorseful, attempted suicide, and then called the police. He received 15 years to life and is still serving time at Pleasant Valley State Prison in California. It's probably not as nice as it sounds.
No, it's
Pleasant Valley.
Pleasant Valley.
It's probably a Pleasant Valley, but to the prison.
Just there, the prison in the middle of this Pleasant Valley.
I mean, if I went in there, I'd be passed around like currency. Look at me face.
It's true, you would.
I would.
You would. You'd get a right good reaming.
I mean, I'd just walk. I've seen Prison Break. Guy comes out, turns his pocket. I'd hold on to that. What I mean? Anything for a quiet life. Either that or I just go, can I go to a solitary, please? Yeah. Can I have a book? Yeah. That, to me, they're like, yeah, you can go out for an hour a day. 23 hours a day, you're stuck in your cell reading books. I'm like, okay, and what's the downside here? You bring my food to me.
What if they turned up with like Atlas Shrugged?
I'd still read it. I'd just be like, fucking I'm Rand while it is prison. So Jeff, the youngest brother, would have other problems. After earning a degree in microbiology at Ohio State University, he married a childhood sweetheart and 2 made their way to Maryland's suburbs of Washington, where a position of the Food and Drug Administration awaited. They settled into a quiet house on Sudbury Road in Silver Spring and had 3 children before the marriage turned ugly and divorce actions were filed. Marcia accused Jeff of physically abusing her twice, and he was convicted of one of the charges, earning a suspended sentence. If the 3 other Clark children had difficulties in their lives, with Bradfield eventually committing the ultimate offence, they paled alongside Hadden. He seemed to have been born evil and liked to hurt people. Children usually ran the other way when he showed up, and those who dared cross him often found their family dog or cat deposited on their doorstep, decapitated. Don't fuck with him. Once when Jeff and Hadden were learning to ride their bikes without hands, Hadden grabbed his handlebars and deliberately rammed his brother. Jeff hit the sidewalk headfirst and began bleeding profusely from the head.
Twat.
Hadden hurried home to tell his mother, Flavia. He said, "There's been an accident, but don't worry, the bike's okay." He didn't
Really?
Yeah, he didn't mention that his brother was pissing the blood from the head. So Jeff years later said, "My brother's sense of reality was always a little askew."
No, really?
Yes. So Flavia Clark at first blamed her son's strange behaviour on bad forceps delivery. Then she thought he had cerebral palsy and took him to an expensive clinic. His father had no such illusions. After a few drinks, he began to refer to his son as the retard. Since Hadden was a second child and a couple had wanted a girl, his mother often dressed him in frilly girls' clothing. A taste for female clothing was implanted in him, as was the name Kristen. His mother addressed him by that name when she was drunk. So let's get here. Both his parents drink a lot. His mum dresses him up in clothes and calls him Kristen, and his dad calls him the retard. And he's also a bit fucking sociopathic.
It's going to be a lotion in the basket situation, isn't there, soon?
So, yet Hadden didn't test as mentally deficient. In fact, he could appear to be a genius when it came to chess, a game that required thinking and concentration. On the other hand, emotionally, he was a small child who lashed out physically when he was publicly criticised. The only place he felt a degree of normalcy was at his grandparents' retirement estate. After his term as mayor of White Plains, his grandfather had purchased a dream house on the edge of town called Wellfleet on Cape Cod. Nobody called him a retard there, and it became as close to heaven on earth for him, because he would, basically, the days we spent there with the most wonderful time of Hadden's life, Jeff said. They were for all of us. Flavia Clark wanted her son to have a trade, so she enrolled him in the prestigious Culinary Institute of America. It sounds like a fucking pyramid scheme, doesn't it?
It does a bit.
It's a 2-year chef school in Hyde Park, New York. There, he surprised everyone by demonstrating a real talent for carving eye sculptures and figures from tallow.
Sounds like fucking Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, yeah. His chef's education was not without incidents. Hadden retaliated against slights by urinating into vats of mashed potatoes, and still he passed enough of his courses to graduate from the Cooking Academy in January of 1974.
Wow, high bar.
I love that. He's like, right, you've been pissing in mashed potatoes. Yeah. You've pissed in mashed potatoes. Yeah.
A-.
But, you know what I mean. Your fucking foie gras was fucking brilliant. So
I fucking ate mashed potatoes.
I love mashed potatoes. You haven't had my mashed potatoes though, mate.
No, I can't do them. I'll tell you what I do like though, like when you mash up...
carrots and swede.
Yeah, that's fucking gorgeous.
That's baby food.
It's fucking gorgeous.
You try, tell you what, you try my mashed potatoes one time.
Okay.
Guarantee.
Okay.
You will fucking love
I'll go the Vale with you and I'll eat mashed potatoes.
Go the Vale with me and I'll cook for you after.
Okay.
There you go.
I feel loved.
So then, in a weird, rare thing of solidarity, all his family turned up on his graduation. So the degree from a top-flight chef school enabled Hadden Clark to pick and choose employers at first, but he was never able to keep a job for more than a few months. His strange behaviour, like openly chugging beef blood in a restaurant's kitchen, did not endear him to fellow employees or employers. Just fucking there with blood. Oh, what are you doing? Drinking fucking beef blood? Hey.
It's only like one off drinking Bovril, isn't it?
I mean, Richard Chase and all that.
Very much. There with the
fucking rabbits in a blender.
The yoghurt pots.
Yeah, just... What are you doing? I've shot a dog, so I'm getting a yoghurt pot here. So, his first jobs were in Provincetown on Cape Cod, where years later he would confess to killing several women in the sand dunes nearby. On one such occasion, he claimed to have murdered a young woman, burying her nude under a sand dune after first removing her hands at the wrists.
It's kind of like that the opening scene from Jaws. Well, just after the opening scene.
Nobody buries anybody in Jaws.
No, but she's like half buried in the sand dunes and all the crabs are eating her.
Yeah, but... Anyway.
It's like you're missing the point.
Hadden told police he used her fingers as experimental bait for surf fishing, a hobby he had become proficient at while living on the Cape. After becoming shunned by restaurant owners in the beach towns of Massachusetts, Hadden Clark did a 1-year stint on the cruise ship SS Norway. After that, there were jobs in Long Island banquet halls and a 3-week assignment at the 1980 Olympics in Lake Placid, New York.
You mean nobody called this in when he was saying this shit?
No, this is when he'd been arrested.
Oh, this was when he'd been arrested. And he was where that big crocodile was.
Yeah. I was like, the fuck you know? Then I was like, Lake Placid. It's a good film.
It's fun. It's very fun.
So in all, Hadden Clark would hold 14 different jobs between 1974 and 1982. During this time, his family disintegrated further. His grandfather died and his grandmother, in poor health, entered a nursing home. His parents divorced, with his father dying soon afterwards from cancer. Hadden, an unsuspected murderer many times over, entered the US Navy as a below-deck cook. It was his last chance at a career, but his shipmates didn't understand a sailor who often wore frilly ladies' panties under his uniform.
I mean in the Navy?
In the Navy. Come and join your fellow man.
The Navy?
I mean, it's weird, isn't it? So, they're there fucking sucking each other off, and he's like, oh, you're fucking wearing women's clothes. Oh, you fucking gay. And he's there sucking. jacking
fucking
a dude off in his face.
gone fucking too far with the women's panties. Why do you have to degrade what we're doing?
Yeah. Fucking don't ask, don't tell, Hadden. There were beatings once he was locked in a meat freezer for 3 hours and the Navy tried moving him to new ships, but there were incidents. After a final beating where he suffered a concussion from his head being banged against an aircraft carrier's deck, Hadden was given a medical discharge diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic.
I mean, having your head banged.
I mean, that smacks as a cover-up to me. That does. He showed up on his brother Jeff's doorstep, which resulted in a brutal killing of a little girl later on. Okay, so you're ready for this?
Yeah.
So Hadden stood outside of his brother Jeffrey's empty home and he was sweating in 92-degree heat. So, give you a thing, he was like 6'2", he was a wiry guy, and he was leaning against a Datsun pickup truck feeling sorry for himself and getting angrier by the minute as the temperature soared. And the house was eerily quiet. Everyone who lived there had gone out and having fun. Jeffrey Clark, the only brother who wasn't in prison, had deserted him. Things were not going well for Hadden. He had been asked to vacate the room he rented at Jess because he had masturbated in front of his young children.
Oh.
That'll do it.
That will, yeah.
That'll fucking do it, won't it? It's like, what are you doing? Oh, jacking off? Yeah, get out. They were his nephews and his niece. A few months before that, he'd been arrested for shoplifting when he was underwear at a local department store. I like my lady's clothing, he once told his mother. Don't try and change me. And his mum's like, I'm not Kristen. I'm not.
I'm too drunk, Kristen.
I'm too drunk and I've started all this. So I'm not going to try and change you. Go talk to your dad. Oh, you can't, he's dead. Less than a year after...
But he'd call you a retard.
Yeah. Not a the so,
retard.
I mean, he's giving him the title of, like, the biggest one.
If you're going to be... No.
We've already been demonetised now for dropping the R word more than 0 times.
We do this for the art.
I'm in it for the art. No. But yeah, this was less than a year he'd been bounced from the Navy. Obviously, being a paranoid schizophrenic. He wasn't taking the medicine they prescribed for him either, and because he just didn't care. Then a week ago, his 6-year-old niece called him a retard. That's it, we're done now. He wanted to kill her for that remark. It wouldn't have been the first time he'd murdered someone who dissed him. So Hadden stood there, seasoned in a hot storm, about to go into his brother's residence on Sudley Road in Silver Spring to pick up the last box of his belongings. As he began to move towards the house, a little girl walked up to him who he'd seen around the neighbourhood several times. Her name was Michelle and she was Eliza's friend who come over at the weekends, the daughter of a divorced man down the street who had custody of her on the weekend. Michelle was wearing a pink ruffled swimsuit and was still wet from playing in a plastic swimming pool.
Paddling pool.
Yeah, that's one. Paddling pool, couldn't think of what it was called then. It was then that Hadden Clark knew how to get her back at his niece for calling him a retard. Nobody who crossed him got away with stuff like that for long. Michelle asked where Eliza was, and he said, she's in the house upstairs in a room playing with dolls. You can go inside if you want to. He watched Michelle wander into the house and heard her steps as she walked up the stairs of his brother's silent home. When she was out of sight, he walked around the back of the truck and pulled a toolbox towards him. He'd made his living as a chef, and inside the metal toolbox were the tools of his trade, every kind of knife a commercial restaurant would ever need. There were deboning knives, carving knives, fish fillet knives with serrated blades, meat cleavers, and more. Each one had been honed to its maximum degree of sharpness. He reached for a 12-inch long chef's knife and casually strolled into the house and upstairs to Michelle. Now, life hadn't treated Michelle's father, Carl Dorr, very well. His 2 college degrees, one in economics and the other in psychology, hadn't done much for him, and by the mid-1980s he had settled into a series of jobs where he spray-painted cars on commission. His personal life was worse. He married Michelle's mother Dorothy in 1978, but after their daughter was born, the marriage not only fell apart, but evolved into a brutal battle. There were times where Carl would slap his wife around in front of Michelle, with the emotional toll falling on the poor little girl. The stress made her stutter and grind her teeth at night. She had seen far too much for a 6-year-old, Dorothy would tell the Washington Post. Once on Valentine's Day of 1976, Carl had shown up with his estranged wife's house and refused to leave. He told her that at the divorce hearing he would lie under oath, say she was an adulteress and unfit mother, and if he lost, he would kidnap Michelle at the school bus stop. Then, according to Dorothy, he threw her against the wall and beat her, causing cuts and bruises. Though both were setting up their daughter for an adulthood which would require weekly visits to a psychiatrist, each loved the little girl in their own way. Carl looked forward to weekends with his daughter, and was certainly the case when the last 2 days of May 1986 when he picked Michelle up from her mother. They had dinner at McDonald's and he brought her a toy at the 7-Eleven, rented a kids' movie from a video store, and then on that hot Saturday he filled a plastic swimming pool at noon, promising to take her to a big neighbourhood pool at 4 this afternoon. She showed off for him for a few minutes, and then Carl went into the house to watch the Indianapolis 500 car race. I don't get car racing. It's just cars going around in a circle.
No, I don't get it. Especially, like, with F1. Like...
There's one game pass now.
For the longest time, like, because my parents were really into F1.
Yeah,
like,
my wife and son are.
Like, for the longest time, like, Michael Schumacher was, like, just constantly winning. It's like, who's going to win this one? Schumacher. And then, like, after the accident, poor guy.
Yeah.
It was Lewis Hamilton. And it's like, who's going to win this one? Lewis Hamilton.
It's boring.
I was always a Jacques Villeneuve mark. Weird. I know nothing about football, but F1.
Weird. So, Carl's rented house was 2 doors down from Jeffrey Clark's home, and while he watched Rick Mears and Bobby Rahal average 171 miles an hour, which was a record, apparently, he forgot to check on the little girl outside. Great parenting. He soon grew bored playing alone and wandered down the street. She soon grew bored. He wasn't. He was happy. She was. She was bored and wandered down the street looking for Eliza. Minutes later, Hadden Clark was tiptoeing up the stairs of the empty house with a knife in his hand and appeared to be as big as an intended victim. He followed her into Eliza's room.
How old was she again?
6.
Fuck.
Or 8. 6, I think. Hadden threw the little girl to the floor and she was on her so fast she didn't get a chance to scream. The first slash was a backhand right to left across her chest. The second would back her along the other way, almost like Zorro making his head sound like that. She fell back in shock and he straddled her, putting his free hand over her mouth, and she surprised him by biting her hand. Always bite somebody. That made him very angry and he plunged a 12-inch knife straight through her throat.
For fuck.
Blood was spurting all over the wooden floor of the little bedroom. The room in the old house sloped and the blood sought at the lowest level, so it was like... He didn't know what to do first. Should he mop up the blood and cover up what he'd done, or try to have sex with the dead girl? He tried the sex part first, but he couldn't make it work. So he raced downstairs to the kitchen and got some plastic trash bags, ran out of his truck, got some rags and an old navy duffel bag, and he was back upstairs in seconds. Hadden stuffed Michelle into a plastic bag and then inside the duffel bag. He fell to his knees, mopping up the blood as if he was swabbing the deck of the aircraft carriers he served on. Everything that he had blood on it was stuffed into the trash sacks. His clean-up looked pretty good to his eyes. Nothing seemed out of place. Nobody would know what happened. Hadden threw the body and the bags into the back of the truck. He had to be at his chef's job in nearby Chevy Chase Country Club in 20 minutes.
Chevy Chase?
Yeah, not the comedian. Chevy Chase. He named himself after a place. Yeah. Chevy Chase. Being late would be noticed. Carl Dorr looked into the backyard several times. He didn't see Michelle. The pool was still with no ripples. Still, he wasn't worried. Sudley Road in Silver Spring, Maryland was a safe suburban street 3 miles from Washington, D.C. border. Nothing exciting ever happened in this leafy enclave. He had no doubt that his daughter was down the street playing with her pal Eliza. He stayed relaxed, paying a few bills while he finished watching the auto race, and Michelle didn't return. Around 5:30, he wandered over to Clark's house. Jeffrey Clark had returned and was back barbecuing. His children from his first marriage were there, as was his new girlfriend. Eliza was part of the group. There was no Michelle. Jeff Clark said he hadn't seen Michelle all day, so did his daughter Eliza. Perplexed, Carl walked to the end of the street and saw nothing. The bewildered father began knocking on doors. There was nothing. Panic began to set in. He drove through the neighbourhood again and then pointed his car in the direction of the nearest police precinct. Then he reported him missing. The moment he did so, He became their prime suspect. Now, Hadden Clark finished his shift at the country club and began driving, the body of the 6-year-old girl still in the back of his pickup truck covered by a metal cap. He stopped off first at nearby Bethesda Naval Hospital to get the cut on his hand dressed. The free medical privileges were part of his benefits package he received when he was discharged from the Navy. When he left the hospital, it was nearly midnight, because he's got that cut from where she bit him.
Why couldn't he just have done that over on his own?
Well, you know what his dad called him. Hadden drove him towards Baltimore on Old Columbia Pike. Do you remember what he called him?
I remember what he called him.
Yeah, so that's why. He's not thinking like that, is he? He's not thinking like you. You're 4 beers in. You got clarity. Hadden drove towards Baltimore on Old Columbia Pike. He saw some woods. He pulled over onto the shoulder of the road and stopped. He had a ready-made story. If the cops came by, he'd tell them he stopped to pee. He wanted to pee and couldn't wait. Michelle Dawes' killer grabbed a duffel bag, a flashlight and a shovel from the back of the truck, stepped over a guardrail and stumbled down a ravine into the woods. At the base of a tree, he dug a grave 4 feet long, digging until he hit clay. He took the little girl from the duffel bag and began dropping her in, but there was one more piece of business. He had to taste it. The flesh was his prize, her death was his revenge. Afterwards, he covered her body with parts of an old mattress he'd found nearby and some leaves, and he climbed back up the incline into his truck, driving from his newly rented room 5 miles from his brother's house. Now, every cop, when they start, is told when a child disappears, it's first to look in direction of the parents or the caregiver. So, statistics, it's usually a 90% chance it's either the parents or the caregiver know what happened to the child. Okay, it's page 1 in the handbook, said Detective Mike Garvey, the first cop to speak to Caldor, and the more they looked at Caldor, the more he looked like their man.
What ice cream now?
Caldor. After all, he hadn't threatened his wife, saying he would abduct their daughter. He had just threatened his wife, saying he'd abducted her daughter 3 months before. He'd also said him and Dorothy were battling over the kid for years. Wasn't Carl the last to see her alive? They went right at him, asking him to take a polygraph test the very next day. When the polygraph examiner, a local fire marshal, told them that Carl might know more about Michelle's whereabouts than he was telling them, the cops thought they had their man. So Carl said later on it was a real good cop, bad cop thing. They were right in my face telling me I'd failed the polygraph test and that it had been 24 hours and they knew she was dead. We're going to find her, they said. When we do, we're coming to get you. His estranged wife told the cops that she thought he'd done it too. She gave them an extra motive. Her estranged husband was trying to get out of paying her $400 a month in child support. I'm English. Caldor was caught inside a nightmare. When he told police that he loved his daughter, they didn't believe him. He took a second lie detector test and passed it easily. In an attempt to prove his innocence, he underwent hypnosis and took sodium pentothal, the so-called truth serum. None of this convinced the cops, but then Carl may have been his own worst enemy. He snapped and in a psychotic episode told a psychiatrist that he'd abducted and killed his daughter. That'd do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're passing all these things and like that, you snap. Yeah, I fucking did it. So it's not going to help your case, is it, Carl? Jesus Christ. I started hallucinating, he recalled. I couldn't take pressure. My brain was soup.
Soup? You don't like soup?
I've got a phobia of soup, Les.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if I'm eating or drinking it. I fuck it off.
What if it's like dead chunky soup?
Then what am I doing with it?
I'm not saying that your phobia isn't valid. I'm just wondering, like,
if it's chunky soup, am I eating this? People are like, yeah, but you can have it in a fucking mug. So I'm drinking it. But
it's not like really chunky soup in a mug. I mean, anything's a container.
It's just...
But no, I understand. Like, if it was oxtail soup or tomato soup, then yeah, that's going to fuck with you. Exactly.
Put it in a mug, you're drinking it, but I'm eating a spoon, so I'm eating it. What the fuck?
Once I went to a Christmas dinner at my Uncle Mike's, right? And the starter for the Christmas dinner was, he'd made this, I think it was like some sort of squash soup. But that was like no fucking soup I've ever had. Like, you could literally put your spoon in the fucking top of it and it'd stand upright. And I was just like, this is porridge.
When I had me on a wedding, Like, the starter meal we had was soup. Fucking... But
They really did you fucking do.
But it was my wedding, so I had to have it. I was like...
Did you not fucking plan that? Couldn't you have said to the caterers, look, anything but soup?
I planned...
I mean, I guess that's not fucking...
Literally, all I had to do was plan the music. That was my job given. I had to plan the music. And the first band on was Carter Unstoppable Sex Machine. Second one was Pop Will Eat Itself. Then it descended into a force from there. People were going up and asking for Oasis, and the DJ was like, sorry, can't.
So did you leave the soup?
No, I forced myself to eat it, but I had about 4 glasses of wine with it.
Do you remember? Do you remember that when we went to that event?
Oh, God. Yeah, all that posh food. We just looked at each other.
After I'd got absolutely fucking twatted the night before.
Basically, we were at a really posh horse racing event for work, and they were serving us food, and he'd got... Well, we both got wanked the night before, but he got even more wanked.
Like, he had to dress me.
Yeah.
He literally had to dress
I wasn't
me.
even sharing a room with him, and I had to dress him. And we went to the event, and they gave us, was it salmon?
It was like salmon on, like, that shit toast.
Yeah, like on a little toast, and it was just there, and we both looked at it, and then we both looked over each other, like...
Because we weren't on the same table either,
No,
were we? We were across the room, and, like, I look over at you, and I'm like...
Honestly, I went to the toilets there, the poshest toilets I've ever been in. Oh, God, I fucking pebble dashed that bottle.
Mate, which was brilliant because, like, at this very posh event, just to put emphasis on how posh this event was.
The Queen was there, wasn't she?
The Queen was there, and her entourage were there, weren't they?
Yeah.
And so an insight into Britain's royal family for you, right? Right? I know we've gone right off the subject.
We will get back.
We will get back, but this is an interesting story in and of itself. So, to put emphasis on what the fucking aristocracy of this country are like, and Luke, do what you want in regards to narcotics.
Oh,
personal choice. I
mean, I'll just get to the point here. All the posh people were doing coke in the toilets.
Yeah, and they were very posh. Like, turn up on TV, that's a lord.
No, literally, like, one woman come in and she's like, I'd like to say your room is very poor. Because she wanted to come into our party, and her dad was trying to pay the people, like, $2,000 for her to come in, and they were like, no. But she did say we were all very poor. And then this other woman started having a fight. Oh, it's Ace. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so
basically, rich people do coke in toilets.
And are cunts.
Yeah. But we did see the Queen, and he was shitting himself because I kept going. Because there were snipers on the roof, weren't there?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do you think they've got, like, listening devices to that? And he was like, yeah, they'll be monitoring phones. So I phoned him. And he was like, what? I was like, take the shot. Take the shot. The Queen is inside. Take the shot. He's like, fucking stop it!
Yeah, you bastard. Yeah, you bastard. And none of my fucking horses come in. Did any of yours?
I didn't take any bets.
Well, when you're at Epsom.
No, I didn't. I just gave mine away. I was like, I'm just here for the free booze.
There was a lot of free booze.
There was. That's when I drank. Now,
I drunk myself sober. Like, I turned up really hungover, like fucking rat-arsed, and didn't want to drink. And after this lovely waitress, like, sort of fed me water through the day, I got to the point, after having my final wee, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get shit-faced now. Then I got angry because somebody was playing Metallica on the bus back, and it was like, I wish he'd shut that shit up or I'm going to fucking bottle him.
Well done.
Do you remember? Oh, and, like, I like pylons. That was that trip.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, back to the...
Sorry, that was 10 minutes of your life you're not getting back. Yeah, so, Carl, he said he started hallucinating, and he recalled his brain was soup. Yeah, I hate soup. So, in his altered mental state, he began to believe that people on television shows were talking about him. He looked behind the set, and when they didn't see anything, he thought the police were altering his reception on the TV. Can you imagine that? He's watching it, and Alf's there, trying to eat a cat. And he's like...
Alf.
No, he's fucking that. Like, believe it or not, I'm walking on air. And it's like,
Also, because we've not done this episode.
What?
Do you remember Alf? He's back.
In pog form.
I'm really sorry. I kind of traded your soul to the guy at the comic book store. But look, I got some cool pogs. Elf pogs. Remember Elf? He's back. In pog form.
So, Steve Allen, the inventor of the pog. So the next day, Carl got into his car and drove to his father's grave. He began talking to his father's headstone. He thought the headstone was speaking back. His mind was so gone, he began to believe he was God's only son. I believed that if I could find Michelle, I could bring her back to life. And if I was able to do that, then I must be Jesus, he said. He began calling himself the White Messiah.
I kind of like how he differentiated himself from the fact that Jesus probably wasn't white.
That's why I'm the White Messiah. So the cops took all of this to be a form of some sort of confession. They had Michelle's father in for questioning again and again. It wasn't long before Carl Dorr was committed to a hospital for 72 hours of psychiatric observation. As soon as he got out, he was called in for questioning again.
Sorry.
You all right? I thought you were laughing, and I was like, oh, he's dying.
No, I won't die. Like, do you know when you, like, sort of burp and try and secrete it, but sometimes it comes up through your nose, and then you make a noise like a parasaurolophus?
In truth, Carl did have something to hide. Ashamed that he'd neglected his daughter that afternoon, he fudged the timeline. The last time he'd seen Michelle was around noon of May 31st, but he told cops it was around 10 past 2 in the afternoon. The time discrepancy was about to give Hadden Clark the perfect alibi. Detective Wayne Farrell would later recall cruising Sudbury Road on the day after Michelle Dorr vanished. He was grasping for any straw and came upon Hadden Clark in the driveway of his brother's house, tinkering with his truck. He said, "Were you here yesterday?" "For about 2 or 3 minutes, Hadden Clark said. That's Hadden Clark, so I don't know.
2 or 3 minutes.
2 or 3 minutes, even though I'm from New York.
Hey!
Oh!
Been a while since we've done that.
It has, yeah. So, Farrell told Mike Garvey about the encounter. He said he checked around and Hadden Clark seemed to be the neighbourhood weirdo. Garvey said to bring him in. Farrell called Jeff Clark and Jeff called Hadden and told him the police precinct be at the police precinct the next morning. He was on time, but Garvey let him cool his heels for 10 minutes before getting to work on him. Hadden appeared to have an airtight story. He said he punched the time clock at his country club where he worked at 2:46 that afternoon. Garvey and Farrell did some figuring.
Was he chefing there?
Yeah, chefing with his big knives. If Carl Dorr said he'd seen his daughter at 10 past 2, then Hadden couldn't have found abducted and killed someone, hid a body within 36 minutes. That was nearly impossible. Still, they were about to let him walk out without being questioned, but they decided to go soft on him at first, asking him about the rabbits he raised behind his brother's house and life before moving in with his brother.
Join the rabbits, George.
Yeah. No, his brother was called Jeffrey, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was Jeffrey.
I was like, fucking hell. Anyway, they gradually began asking him about the children in the neighbourhood and Hadden opened up, complaining that one little boy had once kicked him in the testicles while playing with a group. He confessed that he had once playfully pinned a little girl to the ground. Garvey jumped on that admission. "Is that what you did with Michelle?" He pulled out a photo of the little girl, and when he did, Hadden began rocking back and forth in his chair. Tears appeared in his eyes, and he wouldn't look at the photo. "Is that what you did with Michelle?" Garvey asked again. Hadden mumbled an answer, and then did something the cops weren't prepared. He said, "I feel sick. Do you have a bathroom?" He went into the police station bathroom and began vomiting loudly into the toilet.
That's discreet.
Yeah, the cops were right behind him. "What did you do?" Gary shouted into the store. "Parents need to know. Tell me what happened. They need to bury their child. Was it an accident? Let's talk about it." The suspect answered, retching loudly. As they continued to vomit into the toilet, Garvey slid a photo of Michelle under the store door. Like, "What did you do?" And he's like,
Is this seriously how this went down?
yeah, this is like the scene from fucking Team America where he's just puking in the alley.
Like,
He's like, he's like, "Get out of the street, you fucking bum. Gave up on life, didn't you? What did you do to Michelle?" So,
Jesus, that is really how it went, though. Fuck.
yeah.
Surely they're not allowed to do that.
Well, they are. The police. Missing kid. So, Hadden made what was
Jesus.
later viewed as a partial confession. I don't know, he said between heaves. I may have done something. Maybe sometimes I black out and do things. I don't remember. They were close, inches away from an arrest, but Hadden seemed to get a second wind. He'd be like, glass of water.
No, it won't me.
He then worked out that day and mentioned the 246 punch-in again. Garvey checked his notes. He was like, yeah, shit. Clark was crazy, but you can't kill or kidnap someone or dump or hide a body and then get to work, which was nearly 10 miles away in that kind of time frame. Carl Dorr had given his daughter's killer the perfect alibi, while at the same time directing the suspicion to himself because of his behaviour. You know, saying he was the white messiah. Hadden Clark would walk away to kill again. As for Michelle Dorr, it will be another 14 years until the mystery of her death will be solved and her body found. Hadden Clark's mental state deteriorated over the next 5 years, although his appearance and behaviour weren't bad enough to get him committed to an institution. He eschewed rented rooms and began living under the cap of his pickup truck, often setting up camp in woods just off the interstate highway. His days as a chef were over, no one would hire him, he worked odd jobs at minimum wage gardeners set out by homeless groups and at night would toil at fast food shops. Hadden had plenty of money though, living alone in the woods cost nothing, and by 1990 he had saved nearly $40,000.
Jesus Christ, really? I'm going to take that up.
You'd have to quit drinking. There you go.
Fuck that.
During those years, there were plenty of warnings. The legal system that had focused on Caldor and not Hadden Clark continued to look the other way. In September of 1988, Hadden Clark visited his mother, who was now living in Rhode Island. During his stay, he began stealing items from a house. Flavia caught him and screamed in anger. "What are you doing? Stealing from me!" she yelled.
Kristen.
Hadden knocked his mother down and began kicking her.
Fucking hell.
He then jumped into his truck and tried to run her over. And she jumped aside just in time. The next day, she charged her son with assault and battery and Hadden got a year's probation. Flavia, devastated by Brad's murder conviction and Hadden's assault, wanted nothing to do with her progeny anymore. She wrote a letter to Hadden saying she was going to pretend he was dead until he got some help from the Veterans Hospital. "Always remember that your mother and father loved you," she wrote. The word loved written in past tense. It didn't go unnoticed. They loved him so much. They loved him so much that
We loved you.
we loved you so much that your father called you the retard and I dressed you up as a girl.
Called you Kristen.
In 1988, Hadden Clark was stopped for speeding. Underneath the driver's seat was a .38 caliber Astra handgun. The same police department that are focused on Carl Dorr and not Michelle Dorr's murderer let him go after he pled guilty to a destruction of property charge that occurred earlier in the year. He was able to walk away with another suspended sentence and probation, a slap on the wrist, and now extended into 2 states. The destruction of property charge was particularly egregious and showed his temper was far from under control. In his last rental before going to live inside the truck in the woods, Hadden bounced from a house in Bethesda, Maryland because his landlord said he seemed crazy and evil. Before he left, he literally booby-trapped the house. He began by balancing a 10-gallon can of oil on top of the door so it would spill when the door was pushed open.
This sounds like fucking Home Alone.
After spraying black dye on the living room carpet, he hid rotting fish heads in the family's piano, chimney and stove. In the final act of revenge, he killed both the family cats, placing one dead feline on the front door welcome mat and the other inside the refrigerator. Finally, he stole several inconsequential items that ranged from books to tools, even the family's vacuum cleaner. The smell of decaying fish permeated the house and was extremely difficult to eradicate, the charging document read. I mean, I can imagine it would be.
It would be, yeah.
So, yet the combination of a gun possession charge and vandalism set off no alarm bells about a man the local cops had once, albeit briefly, suspected of killing a 6-year-old girl. There were times that Hadden Clark attempted to get help. He would often show up at local veterans hospitals, but after staying a few days and getting a few doses of Haldol, the antipsychotic drug, he would bolt from them and return to the woods. A doctor's diagnosis was a warning. His mental state is psychosis with questionable etiology. He states that birds and squirrels talk to him and keep him company. He is tearful at times with intermittent outbursts of anger and agitation. He is potential danger to himself through poor judgment and self-defeating behaviour. He's like a poor man's Snow White, isn't he?
He really is.
He's like the birds and squirrels are talking to me. Hadden's own words are recorded by the doctors' hospitals were chilling. I think I have a split personality, he said. I don't like to hurt people, but I do things I am not aware of. In February of 1989, local police again arrested Hadden Clark. This time there was a 17-count criminal indictment. 15 of the counts were for theft. The acts were unusual. Hadden Clark had dressed in women's clothing and visited a number of area churches. While women inside the churches attended their choir practice, he visited the cloakroom and stole both their purses and their coats. On the day he was arrested, he pulled over to the shoulder of the park road and tinkered with his car. When the police offered assistance, Hadden panicked. He began fumbling around in the front seat, attempting to hide some of the women's coats and purses. No, he told the cops. You can't go in my truck. Never say that to a policeman. It was too late. Police had seen a black gun holster hanging at the top of a seatbelt restraint. They wanted to see what else he had. When they saw the women's purses and coats, they asked if he owned them. Hadden Clark said, yeah, they're mine. So the cops were like, they're yours? He was like, yes, I'm a woman.
Is that what he said?
He said, yes, I'm a woman. I mean, nowadays, he'd be like, are you like guessing my gender here, officer? And the police would be like, oh, no.
Yeah, literally, they'd be like, oh, nope.
Yeah. So cops searched further. They found women's wigs, a hypodermic syringe, women's dresses, and a thick roll of cash. Arrested, he finally served some jail time. He stayed inside for 45 days before he posted bail, but later boasted that he did jail time on purpose because it was more comfortable in the country detention centre than being outside in freezing February cold.
I mean, to be fair...
Thinking man, isn't he?
Thinking man.
He began to like... thinking man, retard. Yeah. He began to like the 3 meals a day, a roof over his head, and movies every Thursday. He was almost reluctant to leave when spring arrived. Although some of the charges were dropped in exchange for a guilty plea on 2 counts, the sentencing guidelines still called for 3 months to 2 years. Again, there was probation, even though he was already on probation in Maryland and Rhode Island. I mean, you'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you're probably thinking now, why was the penalty so small? So, this is what they said. The defendant has serious mental problems and is now addressing them. Rockville, Maryland Judge Irma S. Raker wrote in her sentencing opinion. His public defender, Donald Salzman, was so sympathetic. And this isn't a lie. This is the truth. He wrote a letter for Hadden and instructed him to hand it to police any time he was arrested.
What?
The note read, to any police officer, I want the help of my lawyer, Donald P. Salzman, and I want my lawyer to be present before I answer any questions about my case or any other matters. I do not wish to speak to anyone concerning any criminal charges pending against me or anyone else, or any criminal investigation regardless of whether I am charged. I do not want to be in any lineup or give any handwriting samples or give blood, hair, urine or any other samples unless my lawyer is present. My lawyer's address and phone number are Donald P. Salzman, Assistant Public Defender, Office of the Public Defender, 27 Courthouse Square, Rockville, Maryland, 20850 301 279 1372.
Hold on, back up. Really?
Yeah. So, below the letter was a place for the police officer to sign next to the phrase that said, to prove that I have read this statement to you or that you have read it, please sign here. Hadden Clark was a walking time bomb that now had a get-out-of-jail-free card in his back pocket. The courts and the public defender's offices were doing everything possible to keep him on the streets of Maryland and giving him every opportunity to kill again. He would do so very shortly, and the beautiful young woman who would be his victim would die a needless, terrible death because of it. So, when I was 5 years old, I got up the courage to ask my mother if she believed in God. Laura Houteling once wrote, that's it, Laura Houteling. So she once wrote in a high school essay on life and death. She said no and some things that I didn't understand. When I asked what would happen when somebody dies if there was no God, she said she didn't know. That sounded pretty ridiculous and lonely to me, and I was scared because I didn't want anyone to die anymore and wished there was a God for my mummy to believe in. So Laura Houteling's divorced mother Penny was a psychotherapist, and Laura was considered a brilliant someone who was going places in life. Nobody was surprised when she was accepted into Harvard University. Her friends expected great things from the beautiful blonde, whose friends sometimes called her Twiggy because she was 6 feet tall and looked like Twiggy the model. She was going to be president of this country one day, one of her close friends, Susanna Maroney, said. The words were spoken after Hadden Clark killed and tortured her in the worst way possible.
Oh.
So Penny Houtelling's home in Bethesda, Maryland was about 10 miles from where Hadden had murdered and cannibalised Michelle Dore in 1986. Penny liked to help the unfortunate, and though she was doing a good deed when she hired what she thought was a homeless man from a local church organisation in 1992. She needed a gardener, and Hadden proved to be a good worker that soon cleaved to her as she was his mother. So Hadden attended to her zinnias and pruned her perennials so well that she began to give him the run of the kitchen. He was allowed to make himself coffee and use the bathroom while working without asking. Penny was trusting and perhaps not very observing. When a graduated strand of pearls disappeared, she didn't confront her employee. She also failed to notice that her underwear and other clothing was being stolen, one piece at a time.
Was he wearing these?
We'll get to that, Les. Penny had once complained to Hadden about some missing gardening tools, and her employee had blown up and yelled at her. Maybe she was being too hard on him, she thought at the time. Laura returned home from Harvard graduation in the summer of 1992. For Hadden, he had become mentally and emotionally affixed to Penny. It seemed that Penny had now had another child. She also appeared to like this child more than him. Probably because you're a fucking gardener. Within days, Hadden Clark was plotting revenge. In mid-October, Penny Houteling told Hadden that she would be going away to a conference for a week. She gave him the exact dates from the 17th to the 25th. That was all Hadden Clark needed. The next day, he visited a local hardware chain store and purchased 2 rolls of duct tape, some braided rope and some nylon cord. That's got to set alarm bells off somehow. In the left-hand corner of the cheque he used for the purchases, where the word memo was printed, he wrote, Laura. That Saturday, 17th of October, Laura went to a horse meeting nearby Middleburg, Virginia. A gala dinner followed the event afterwards. The next day, she slept in and watched a Sunday NFL football game with her older brother Warren and his housemate. She had taken a temporary job in Washington until she decided whether to go on to law school or become a teacher. There was a big project at the firm due to start the next morning, so she went to bed early, just after 10 o'clock. Around midnight, Hadden Clark parked his truck on the next street to the Houteling house. He went to Penny's gardening shed and grabbed the spare house key, which he knew was kept inside. Hadden didn't look or feel like himself. For starters, he was wearing a woman's wig. Next to his skin, though, he was wearing Penny Houtelling's underwear.
Oh.
He carried a black purse, and over Penny's lingerie, he wore a woman's blouse and some slacks. He also wore a woman's trench coat, and underneath the trench coat, a concealed .22 caliber rifle. He turned the key in the lock, tiptoed silently to Laura's bedroom, and once inside, used the gun to nudge her awake. His first words left the young woman speechless. He said, "Why are you in my bed?" She didn't respond because, what were you going to say to that? She then said, "What are you doing in my bed?" And she's like, What? And he's like, "Why are you wearing my clothes?" Then Laura began to cry, and he looked at her and said, "Tell me I'm Laura." So she said, "You're Laura, please don't hurt me." Hadden asked Laura Houteling to swear on the Bible that he was Laura. She did. Then, holding the gun on her, he forced Laura to get up, undress, and take a bath. After the cleansing ritual, he led her back down into the bedroom and made her lie down on his stomach. His plan was to abduct her, take her to his campsite in the woods, and introduce her to Hadden.
This doesn't bode well, does it?
No. He bound her wrists with duct tape and then her ankles. He turned her over and began covering her mouth with tape, but got so excited he couldn't stop, and the tape soon covered her nose and eyes. She couldn't breathe, and Laura struggled until the lack of air suffocated her and she lay motionless. As Laura lay still, Hadden began removing the tape from her face with a pair of scissors. Excited, his hand slipped, and the sharp shears pierced her neck and caused blood to flow onto the sheets and pillowcase. He became fascinated with the earrings she was wearing and decided to take them as a souvenir. When he had a hard time removing the second one, he simply snipped it off with a pair of scissors, amputating the lower part of her ear and causing more blood to flow. Hadden Clark sat by the bed and watched her nude body for nearly an hour. At times he stroked her breasts, but would later claim that neither raped nor practised cannibalism on any part of her remains. At 3 a.m, he wrapped her body up in a queen-size sheet, slung over his shoulder, and stashed her remains on a narrow bed underneath the cap of his rear of his truck. He went back inside and gathered up the bloody evidence, the sheet, mattress pad, pillowcase, and carried them out alongside some trophies. Laura's high school ring, a crystal unicorn, and other personal effects went into his pockets. Then he lay down on her bed and slept. Laura's killer left the house around 8 that morning. He was still wearing the woman's wig and carrying the purse. A housekeeper standing with a child waiting for a school bus would later tell police she thought the poor person was Laura, headed out to her job. He must have looked a lot like her then.
Yeah.
Well, technically...
Done a good job.
Well, technically he was like, tell me I'm Laura. She's probably like... The housekeeper's probably like, hello, and he's like, hello, I'm Laura. She's like, oh, it's Laura. So while Hadden slept, Laura's employer began calling the house, each time getting an answering machine message. It wasn't like Laura to miss work and give no explanation. Concerned, she sent someone out to the house to look around. The young woman was a personal friend and got no answer when she rang the doorbell. Alarmed, she telephoned Laura's brother and began calling her friends. There was no reason to call the police, yet. After searching the house, Warren Houtling decided to walk the route Laura took to the bus stop that she often used to take her to work. As he walked down the street, he saw Hadden Clark driving towards him in his pickup. Hadden was planning another visit to the house for more thievery. Innocently, Warren tried to wave him down to see if the family gardener knew anything about his sister's whereabouts. Indeed, Hadden did pull over, but when Warren walked towards him, he had second thoughts and sped away as if the devil himself was chasing after him. Warren thought that behaviour was a bit weird, but it's Hadden. So most of his behaviour is a bit weird, he thought, and didn't think much about it. Late that night, he called the police and his mother. The cops told him not to worry, Laura would likely turn up soon, they said. Hadden was frightened by his encounter with Warren. He decided to bury the prize that night. He drove to the spot on Interstate 270, just across the highway from his latest campsite. Laura was heavy, though. She weighed much more than Michelle Dorr, and he stumbled with the dead weight until he dropped her just 20 feet from the road. He dug feverishly until there was a shallow grave. He rolled her into it and covered the body with dirt and leaves. In the months to come, animals would discover the body's scent. They would dig up and pour into it, trying to get to the remains. By spring, Laura's wrists and lower extremities would rise above the ground, the heavy rains forcing the body upwards. Still nervous after burying Laura, Hadden Clark drove north towards New England. In Rhode Island, he stopped and stuffed some bloody sheets, mattress pad, and the items he stolen from Laura in a self-storage locker that he rented by the year. He kept the pillowcase there.
You know what? Like, it's just occurring to me, because I'm like, just sitting here, like, listening to you and, like, thinking. I mean, for one, like, bury him deeper. But, like, animals are attracted to that shit, and that's how these people don't get away with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you, like, find the, like, excrement of, like, a big predator, like a bear or a cougar, and, like, just sort of spread it round the area.
Les, you're burying a body here. You really haven't got time to go and find the excrement of a big predator.
Well, you just need to plan this ahead, don't you?
Well, you did...
Sorry, just thoughts, musings. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so he kept the pillowcase. That way he could relieve the night by burying his face into it. If he wanted a bigger thrill, he would take the bloody sheets out of the storage and play with them. He drove back to Washington feeling pretty proud of himself.
He's a twat, isn't he? He's a weird guy.
Yeah. Are you just getting that now?
I mean, it was sort of telegraphed.
By now, Montgomery County, Maryland cops wanted to speak to Hadden. Warren and Penny had both mentioned his name, and when he got his description and was phoned into headquarters, alarm bells went off. They were like, wasn't he that guy from the Michelle Dorr thing? So they're still trusting Penny Houghton will poo-poo the accusation. Hadden wouldn't hurt anyone. He's just a gardener. You're just not fucking seeing lawnmower. You're not seeing lawnmower, man. Jesus Christ.
You've not seen Alan Titchmarsh kick off.
Fucking yeah, man.
Fucking, oh God, he's a twat, man. Like Alan Titchmarsh fucking goes off on one.
No,
you ever seen that when him and Monty Don come across each other? Like fucking elephant seals going at each other. Anyway.
Apologies to everyone who isn't English. I'm boring. and knows who Alan Titchmarsh is. So the cops had other ideas. Mark Garvey's
Or
boss...
Monty Don.
No one cares. Robert Phillips was called and he remembered Garvey's account of Hadden vomiting in the bathroom and his alibi. When he was asked whether or not to bring him in, Phillips nearly exploded. Hadden Clark? Absolutely. Let's go. Let's get him. That son of a bitch got away once, he shouted into the phone. Excited. Possibly while masturbating. The cops called Hadden's voicemail number and Hadden called back almost immediately. He was cool. No, he wouldn't come by the station right now, he said. He was going to bed in his truck. They would have to wait until tomorrow.
Did he get away with this?
Well, he's still got his letter, hasn't he? So after the call, Hadden drove back to the same church parking lot near Penny and Laura's house. He went into his truck, found the bloody pillowcase and ran into some woods that bordered the church. He threw the pillowcase near the base of a tree and then went back to his truck, falling asleep. When Hadden arrived the next day, he was escorted by Sue Snyder, head of a local homeless group. The cops were gentle, partly because they had nothing to arrest him for and partly because he was chaperoned. Hadden, of course, had an alibi for everything except for the time Laura was killed. He was sleeping, he said, in his truck. When they left the station, he began crying and Sue Snyder asked him why. He said, I feel so bad for Penny and Warren. Knob. When Laura failed to turn up, the local cops decided to do a complete search of the area. A dog from the canine unit led them into the woods near Penny's house that bordered the church. There, the dog turned up one of Penny's bras, a woman's blouse, a high-heeled shoe, and Laura's bloodied pillowcase. Taken to a lab, it was determined that the blood was the same type as Laura's. The police then got lucky. There was a single fingerprint on the blood. The cops hauled in Hadden again. I'm just a homeless man, he blubbered. I don't have any friends. I'll be jobless after this. During the interrogation, the cops buffs, we found the pillowcase in the woods. He said, it had a fingerprint on it. The fingerprint's yours. Well, they have found a fingerprint. It's not been identified yet. They were hoping for a confession and reaction. Hadden didn't completely crack, but he began whimpering and tears fell. He pulled the wooden toboggan he was wearing down over his eyes. What did you do with Laura Houteling? A detective growled. I don't remember, he answered. Despite the statement, the cops again let him go. They still had nothing to hold him on.
They didn't even make him sick this time.
No, he's just like, no. Over the next few days, using search warrants, the police examined Hadden's bank account and found a copy of the incriminating cheque where the suspect had written at the hardware store, where he'd put Laura on it. Because he's an idiot. They also located his campsite, searched it, but didn't find Laura. Then the lab confirmed it was Hadden's fingerprint on the bloody pillowcase. The cops found Hadden late that night, sleeping in the back of his truck, his arms wrapped around a one-eyed teddy bear. Hadden Clark would never see freedom again.
For literally a one-eyed teddy bear.
It's like Mr. Burns' teddy bear.
Simpsons reference number 2.
So, faced with overwhelming evidence, even though there was no body, Hadden Clark pled guilty to second-degree murder and received a 30-year sentence in 1993. Within days after his sentencing, he led the police, his lawyers, and the prosecutors to Laura Houteling's body. In prison, Hadden made several mistakes. He began boasting of his many murders, telling inmates in detail about how he killed Michelle Dorr, Laura, and others. The convicts, who hated child killers and who believed that informing on Hadden might also get them early parole, contacted the police. In 1999, he was tried twice more. The first for stealing from the Mahoney family, which netted him another 10 years. The second for the murder of Michelle Dorr, where several of his fellow inmates testified against him, and he got another 30 years. At the trial, his defence attorney tried to confuse jurors by pointing the finger at Carl Dorr, which didn't work. After the conviction, a crazed Hadden Clark confessed to a convict who believed he was Jesus Christ, the prisoner this is, who apparently did strike a fucking resemblance to him. He told him where he buried Michelle Dorr. In January 2000, Hadden led them to the woods and helped them to dig up the remains, nearly 14 years after he killed her. Now, you might think an imprisoned Hadden Clark would then sink into obscurity, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. Instead, he convinced an FBI serial killing team that he might have murdered as many as a dozen other women. Between January and April 2000, he and his friend Jesus were escorted to several states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where he claimed to have murdered young women. I love how his friend's Jesus. To facilitate, it's like this guy actually thinks he's Jesus as well. It's not just like, my name's Jesus. He's like, no, I'm fucking Jesus.
It's kind of like that fucking film, Bubba Hotep, where you fucking got
One of the best films ever.
in it just.
So, to facilitate the search, law enforcement visited a local Kmart where they purchased female clothes and a wig for him to wear while they searched the dunes of Cape Cod. In the end,
Gyms of Cape Cod.
the dunes.
Oh, the dunes.
Yeah. In the end, the search for the bodies was fruitless, partly because more than 20 years had passed. Sand dunes have shifted, and the sites where Hadden claimed to bury victims have been covered over with asphalt and were now strip malls. Also, probably because he was lying. The police, with Hadden's help, did find something that gave credibility to Hadden's claims of more victims. At the edge of his grandfather's former estate, they dug up a large bucket that had about 200 pieces of women's jewellery in it. Several of the items belonged to Laura Houteling. Hadden claimed to have taken the jewellery from each of his victims as souvenirs. Near the top of the bucket was an exquisite silver wood nymph pin. Hadden Clark told detectives that pin was his angel of death, and that it had taken from his first victim. He claimed to have worn it pinned to Penny's clothing the night that he killed Laura Houteling. And thus ends the story of Hadden Clark. He's a weird one, isn't he?
Jan,
Yes.
that was like a fever dream.
You loved it though, didn't you?
I fucking loved it. I was here for all of it.
I know you were.
But what the fuck?
I mean,
how did he get that far? How did he get like a fucking
Can I just say-
a literal get out of jail
I would
free
like
card?
to say, because I'm in quite a few serial killer groups on Facebook, there was a woman who writes to Hadden Clark, and he'd sent her some money, like $400. And she said, oh, I feel bad because, he's in prison and they don't get much money. And
Because they're in
someone
prison.
Said, and someone said, oh, don't worry about it. Hadden Clark's from a rich family, so he's not going to go for that money. And I'm like, doesn't matter.
He's not getting
He's
out.
a fucking child killer. If he's sending you $400, take that fucking money and then say, thank you, you fucking child killer. I just write back saying, to the retard, thanks for the money, fucker. Send more. I might write to him and say, dude, I'll send you some women's clothes if you fucking send me $400. Shall we write to him?
I think so. I think we should.
Let us know in the comments. Should we write to Hadden Clark to try and get
Hadden
some
Clark?
to extort him for money? That's literally what it is. It's extortion.
That's gross exploitation of.
Yeah, but he did murder
He
a child.
murdered a child, so it's.
And did try to have sex with the body, but he couldn't make it work because he's an impotent piece of shit. That's extorting for money.
Okay.
I'm trying to extort BTK for a poem.
Okay, let's
Really want a poem off
We'll
him.
extort Hadden Clark for money.
Let's extort everyone. Really? Speaking of extortion, if you do enjoy this, you do want to support us, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com/enterthedark. It's not extortion if you support us. You get free shit anyway, so it's like stickers, mugs, t-shirts.
Ask Marie, she loves it. In fact, Marie has told me something that she's going to do.
Can you tell us, or have we just got to edit this?
Yeah,
bit
what
out?
she wants to do is like use all the stickers we
Yeah.
send her and plaster some random fucking toilet with them.
I did that in Manchester.
And she means like plaster. So like there's going to be this zero context, me and you,
Mine in your face.
mine in your face, and other weird.
At least then, like when
references.
if the police contact, we were like, dude, we've never been to America. I haven't even got a passport, so like, it can't be me. I do know Alicia went on a night out and was drunk and put one of our stickers on a lamppost somewhere.
Good.
So,
Good.
Also, Alicia says she's going to start calling you Papa from now on. Because, because we were talking about it and she said, her dad walked out on her. And I said, Les just drinks all the time. She's like, maybe I could. Maybe he's my dad. Papa? So, like, you're a dad now.
Okay. I mean, I can't promise you much.
She's already got. She says, she'll just get drunk with you. She's not expecting any sort of fatherly advice or anything.
Good. I just hope she's got a good liver.
Well, then, if you have a Alicia, let us know. So there you go. Yeah, remember, guys, if you do like what we do,
I won't
please,
sell it.
you can please like the video, leave a generic comment for us, and subscribe if you don't already. It's 2022. Why am I telling you this? You know what to do. Also, you can get in touch with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Email us at enterthedarkpodcast@gmail.com. Please do email me, because all I'm getting is stuff like scams saying, oh yeah, you're Norton 360. You're going to be debited $382. I'm like, fucking knobhead.
I love them scams. You get them quite a bit.
Yeah, but the best one is
for Bitcoin. I get a lot for Bitcoin.
But the best thing you can do is if you go onto the, YouTube, there's people who phone these people up with fake voices and stuff, and like literally hack into this company's like computers and delete all their files and shit. It's awesome. The race. But yeah, thank you. That was a weird one, but yeah, we shall be back soon. I am Jan. Here's Les. Take care. Goodbye.